Over the last 3 years, I've been shooting a lot of video on my iPhone. And in this video, I'm going to give you 8 simple cinematic tips based on what I've learned. I mean, with any camera, if you use it enough over a period of time, you're going to learn some tips and tricks and various sort of ways to get the best footage from that camera. And these kind of methods might even go against some of the advice that you've been given on how you should go about shooting video. But I really love shooting video on my iPhone because it's so much fun and it's just really convenient. So if you want to improve your skills, I've got some ideas for you. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, I promise you that by the end of this video, you'll have better looking footage. And if you do find this stuff useful, you might want to think about taking my 9-day course. And if you do want to know more about that, just let me know in the comments and I'll give you some more details. Okay, here's my first tip. Firstly, I'm going to assume that you have iOS 17. If you don't, then do try to install that, because the first thing that you need to do is go to camera settings, record video, and then toggle on lock white balance. Now, when you record a video, the camera is going to lock the white balance so that it doesn't change during the shot. The during the shot part is the most important thing that you need to understand, because with this locked, the iPhone camera is going to keep adjusting white balance while you're not recording, but as soon as you hit record, white balance is now locked and it will stop adjusting. So why is this good? Well, because it can look a little bit messy when white balance adjusts during a shot. If we look around ourselves, we don't see colors changing before our eyes. Yellow flowers don't go orange, blue skies don't go purple, and so on. Well, if you do, then probably best you see an optician. The thing is that once you bring a video clip into your editing system, white balance can now be corrected. But that is actually much harder to fix if the white balance is adjusting during the shot. Well, you probably already know that you can lock exposure and focus just by long pressing on the screen. So again, you might lock this just to avoid this messy looking footage. But it's not actually like white balance where there's no real reason for it to be unlocked, because sometimes you want locked exposure and focus and sometimes you don't. So when should we lock it? Personally, I just go shot by shot. For example, if I'm moving the camera from a dark area to a light area, then I'll probably want it locked. But if the light isn't really changing much, but I do want the focus to stay on auto, then I'll just leave this unlocked. Let's look at another setting. Above the lock white balance switch, we have a lock camera switch, and I have that also toggled on. Why? Well, because another thing that I don't want changing during a shot is the camera. What happens is that you see the image suddenly change, and again, it looks messy. It is fine for convenience, but if you want more polished videos, then just have this toggled on. Already, if you just follow these 3 simple tips I've given you, your footage will immediately look more professional than if you'd left your iPhone with the default settings. Okay, this is another settings tip. On the same record video page, there's an HDR switch. So unless you know that you definitely want to shoot HDR, which is otherwise known as Dolby Vision, then switch this off. Now, Dolby Vision requires that you edit in a special color space. And as well, if you master your video in Dolby Vision, not all platforms support it, and not all monitors support it either. In other words, it gets kind of complicated. So I actually already made a video all about shooting, editing, and then uploading iPhone Dolby Vision videos to YouTube. So if that's something you want to do and you want to learn about that, then check out that video. These days, I shoot everything in 4K. I edit in 4K, master, and then upload all my videos to YouTube in 4K. Just because by using the 4K setting, you're really maximizing the image information that you're working with. And as you go through the process of editing and mastering and then uploading to a platform, your video is going to get compressed. So it's a much better idea to start off with the most color information and the most image information that you can. So tip number 5 is to switch your resolution to 4K and then keep it there. You can either switch it in the recording video settings or by tapping the resolution setting in the corner of the camera app interface. But I actually recommend that you go into settings and then select a 4K option so that it has this tick next to it. And now, every time you open your camera app, It's going to be set to these settings by default. And I have mine set to 4K and 30 frames per second as my default. The native iPhone app is actually really easy to use, but it does have limitations. So if you want to have more control over your iPhone cameras, think about installing a camera app. The most famous is Filmmaker Pro, which has tons of features, probably more than any other app. But there's also the recently released Blackmagic Cam, which is nice and easy to use. And if you've used Blackmagic cameras before, then you might be familiar with the layout. Filmmaker Pro is by far the more developed app, but it does actually cost something. Currently, you can get it for about $20 a year. On the other hand, the Blackmagic Cam app is totally free. Of course, there's plenty of other apps as well, but I'm not going to list them all here. Maybe for another video, I will go through all the different apps. But anyway, these apps allow you to set shutter speed, ISO, and white balance manually, and you can't do that with the native iPhone camera app. And of course, there's tons of other features too. Too many to go into here, but I don't use these apps for every shot. It really depends on the type of shot that I'm capturing. For example, there's no cinematic mode in these apps, so you're going to need to use the native app for that. And last year, I shot a documentary with an iPhone 12 Pro Max. The documentary was about a filmmaker shooting a horror film with an iPhone, but a lot of the scenes were in very low light. And with the iPhone camera app, I got a lot of noise. And this noise makes the video look low quality. And of course, the noise is created by having a high ISO. But by using Filmmaker Pro, I was able to control the ISO and reduce the noise to a more acceptable level. And by the way, that full documentary is available to watch for my members on Patreon. Now, if you want the highest quality slow motion, I recommend that you don't use the slow motion setting in the camera app. Yes, it does allow you to shoot 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second video, but that video is going to be limited to 1080p resolution. And as we talked about before, I really strive to capture the most image information as possible when I'm filming, so I much prefer to have 4K slow motion. So to get that, just switch your camera to 60 frames per second at 4K resolution. And when you edit this video, slow it down to 30 or 24 frames per second, depending on your project timeline. And now you've got this 4K resolution slow motion. So it's not going to be as slow as the 120 or 240 frames per second stuff, but I find that slowing motion by 50% is enough to create nice dramatic slow-mo. Now, if you find your video looks a little bit washed out for some reason, try pulling down the exposure a touch. The iPhone camera app often overexposes photos and videos, but it's very easy to adjust that just by using the EV control, which is the exposure value. Either tap the screen and use the slider, or tap the small arrow, then tap the plus/minus button to open up the exposure value setting. And this second way is easier to use, and it's actually going to stay in position after you set it. It might take you a couple extra taps, but it's probably worth it. If you find that the shadows are now too dark, don't worry. Keep going, capture that video. So when you've finished, then open the video clip in your iPhone's Photos app. Tap Edit and now tap Adjust. Swipe along until you find the shadows setting. Then use the slider to push up the shadows. So you're just increasing the exposure a little bit just in the shadows, not in the whole image. So it'll only affect the dark areas of the image. Just a little bit, not too much. If you go too much, then you start to get that messy noise that's going to degrade the quality of your video, but just enough to reveal a little bit of extra detail. And now your video will look more evenly exposed than if you'd simply used the camera's auto settings. That's it for this video. If you want to learn more about smartphone filmmaking, then you can join me on Patreon. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye.